A single symbol carved in Anatolia appears again in Mesoamerica thousands of years later. This is the story of 26 symbol migrations, the journey of one foundational motif across continents. By the end, you will see the hidden connections that link seemingly separate human cultures into a single, global story. How did one design become a creator god in one land and a map for the dead in another? What does this tell us about the stories we all share? What ancient symbol in your own life might be a world traveler? Our story begins with a single, simple shape. Think of a circle with a dot at its very heart. This is our main character, a motif so elemental it feels almost innate. It is not a detailed picture of a god or a beast. It is a geometric essence, a primal seed of an idea. Its power lies entirely in its profound simplicity. This circle and dot could be almost anything. It is the sun in the sky. It is a single cell, the beginning of life. It is a portal to another world, or the concept of a center, a point from which everything expands. This inherent ambiguity is its greatest strength, because it was not locked into one specific meaning. It became a perfect vessel. It was a blank slate, ready to be inscribed with the beliefs, fears, and hopes of every culture it encountered. This geometric simplicity gave it the legs to walk across continents. It was easy to remember, easy to draw in sand or carve in stone, and infinitely open to interpretation. One person sees a celestial body, another sees the soul, a third sees a map. This one versatile design, this seed, was about to be carried on the winds of human migration, ready to grow into 5 completely different endings. This symbol did not travel by ship or by trade caravan. Its first great journey was far more ancient and gradual, a slow-moving current within the deepest streams of human dispersal. Think of small bands of hunter-gatherers, their entire world contained within the distance they could walk in a season. Their lives were intimately tied to the rhythms of the hunt and the gathering of wild plants. In this world, our circle and dot was not yet a grand spiritual emblem. It was a piece of practical magic, a tool for survival etched onto a piece of mammoth ivory, painted on a river-smoothed pebble, or scratched onto the handle of a spear thrower. Its meaning was immediate and tangible. For a hunter tracking migratory herds, it could represent the life-giving sun, a guide across vast, unfamiliar landscapes. For a community relying on the fertility of plants and animals, it might be a powerful focus for rituals, a plea for abundance. This was an animistic worldview, where every rock, stream, and star could hold a spirit, and our simple symbol was a key to interacting with that animated world. These early people carried this potent idea with them as they moved, generation after generation, across land bridges that are now submerged beneath the sea, and along coastlines rich with shellfish and other resources. They were not consciously spreading a symbol, they were simply carrying their culture with them, a cultural toolkit that included this incredibly versatile design. This slow, organic crawl, a process taking thousands of years, laid down the very first pathways. It etched this primal motif into the bedrock of human consciousness across continents, a silent, foundational layer upon which all the later, more elaborate stories would be built. Then the world began to shrink, as the first farmers settled into villages, and those villages grew into the world's earliest cities. A new kind of pathway emerged. These were not the meandering trails of hunter-gatherers, but purpose-built roads connecting empires. Our symbol, once carried in the minds of nomads, now found a faster, more dynamic mode of travel. It hitched a ride on the burgeoning trade networks that crisscrossed the ancient world. Imagine a Phoenician merchant ship, its hull laden with vibrant purple cloth and fragrant cedar wood, sailing across the Mediterranean. Stamped on the clay seals of its cargo jars is our familiar circle and dot. Or picture a caravan of Bactrian camels, their bells clinking softly as they plod along the Silk Road, their heavy saddlebags filled with spices and precious stones. Woven into the very fabric of the textiles they carry, the same motif is repeated. This was no longer a symbol of survival magic, it was now a commodity of thought. It was stamped onto coins that passed from hand to hand in busy marketplaces. It was painted on amphorae containing wine and olive oil, traveling from one culture's table to another's. In the bustling ports of the Levant and the crowded serais, the roadside inns of Central Asia, the symbol was exposed to a constant, swirling melting pot of languages, gods, and ideas. A merchant from Mesopotamia might see the circle and dot as a representation of the sun god Shamash. A trader from the Indus Valley might recognize it as a sign of a cosmic egg. They would barter not only for goods but completely unknowingly for the very meanings attached to this design. In these exchanges, the symbol was transformed. It was no longer a local secret, bound to one tribe's understanding of the world. It became an international concept, a visual word that was gaining new definitions with every transaction. This constant cross-pollination in the world's first global hubs primed our simple motif for its first major evolutionary leap. It was about to be adopted by sophisticated, literate urban centers, and they would give it a power and a story it had never known before. The true magic of our symbol's journey lies not in its travel, but in its transformation upon arrival. It never entered a blank slate. Every culture it encountered possessed its own unique cultural lens, a dense filter of deeply held beliefs, environmental realities, and sacred stories. This lens determined everything. A single, simple circle with a dot could be seen as the life-giving sun in an agricultural society that lived and died by its harvest cycles. That very same design, arriving on the shores of an island nation, might be instantly recognized as a protective talisman against the perils of the sea, a charm to keep sailors from drowning in the vast, unforgiving ocean. The symbol itself was a constant, but the meaning poured into it was entirely local. Consider the spiral, another ancient and widespread motif. In one culture, it could beautifully illustrate the sacred cycle of reincarnation, the endless loop of life, death, and rebirth. Just a few hundred miles away, a coastal people might look at that identical spiral and see only the terrifying, destructive vortex of a whirlpool, a force of nature to be feared and appeased. The object is the same, but the story it tells is written by the people who behold it. Our core motif, the circle and dot, was a Rorschach test on a global scale. Its interpretive flexibility was its greatest evolutionary advantage. It was not a rigid doctrine to be accepted or rejected, but a versatile container, ready to be filled with whatever a culture valued most. This is the fundamental engine that drove its incredible diversification. It was this very process of reinterpretation, of seeing a familiar truth in a foreign shape, that led our symbol to its first major branching point, a moment where one design was about to give birth to two completely different destinies. So in one land, the symbol's journey culminated in pure creation. It was absorbed into the very heart of a theogony, a story explaining the birth of the gods themselves. In this first ending, our simple circle and dot underwent a magnificent apotheosis. It did not just represent a god, it became one. Perhaps the design evolved, its lines multiplying into a series of concentric rings. To the people of this culture, these rings were not mere decoration. They were the walls of the cosmic egg, the primordial vessel that contained the entire potential of the universe before the dawn of time. The dot at its center was the spark of consciousness, the first thought of the creator deity that would eventually shatter the shell and bring forth all of existence. Alternatively, the motif might have grown more complex, its path curving into a labyrinthine pattern. This was not seen as a maze to be solved, but as the very blueprint of a divine mind. Every twist and turn contained a different aspect of creation, a law of nature, or a star in the sky, all held within the consciousness of the first being. This interpretation endowed the symbol with an immense, untouchable sacred power. It was no longer a tool for survival or a trader's mark. It was a direct emanation of the divine. You would find this symbol carved deep into the stone of temple sanctuaries, a focal point for prayer. It was stamped onto royal seals and woven into the robes of kings, used to confer ultimate legitimacy by connecting the ruler directly to the cosmic order they claimed to represent. This was the symbol's ultimate ascent, its first ending as a creator god. But this was only one possible path, for the very same design carried along a different route was destined for a role that was its complete opposite, a purpose not of glorious beginnings but of solemn endings. But while one culture saw a map for creation, another saw a map for the end. In a land preoccupied with the journey after death, our symbol was radically reinterpreted. It became a guide for the soul navigating the ultimate unknown. This society possessed a complex funerary culture, one that believed the afterlife was not a simple destination, but a perilous voyage filled with tests, guardians, and treacherous pathways. The simple circle and dot evolved to meet this profound need. Its lines might have multiplied into an intricate labyrinth, its curves twisting into a spiral that seemed to descend into darkness. These were not abstract patterns. They were a spiritual cartography, a literal diagram of the route the soul must travel to reach its final rest. The dot was no longer a spark of life, but the soul itself, a tiny point of consciousness moving through the cosmic machinery of the afterlife. You would find this version of the symbol carved with utmost care onto tombstones, a permanent signpost for the departed. It was painted in vivid pigments inside the wooden lids of sarcophagi, the last thing the soul would see, a reminder of the path ahead. Small amulets bearing the design were placed in the hands of the dead or tucked among their burial goods, acting as both a protective talisman against underworld demons and a kind of celestial GPS. This second ending speaks to a universal human anxiety, the fear of what lies beyond and the deep, abiding hope for a safe passage. It shows how the exact same visual form, born from the same primal seed, could offer comfort in the face of our greatest mystery, transforming a symbol of cosmic birth into a companion for the final journey. This design did not only guide souls to the afterlife, however, it also had a powerful, practical purpose guiding the hands of the living in their daily work. Yet for all its power over life and death, our symbol also offered a way to seize control. A third civilization looked at the very same lines and saw neither a creator god nor a map for the dead. They saw a tool. Its abstract geometric nature made it a perfect key for unlocking the future and bending the world to human will. In their eyes, these patterns were not just artistic. They were a direct reflection of the universe's hidden machinery, a celestial code that, if properly read and manipulated, could reveal coming fortunes or cast potent magic. Imagine a village soothsayer crouched in the flickering light of an oil lamp, casting a handful of marked stones onto a worn cloth. Among them, a pebble etched with our circle and dot lands face up. Its position relative to the other stones is not random. It is a word in a silent language, interpreted to predict the success of a harvest or the outcome of a journey. Or picture a priest, his brow furrowed in concentration, using a ritual dagger to meticulously trace the symbol's form into the damp sand of a riverbank. With each line, he is not drawing, he is building a metaphysical structure, a trap for malevolent spirits or a channel for healing energy. This was the symbol's operational phase. Its value was no longer in what it represented, but in what it could do. It became an active instrument of power, a direct bridge between the human realm and the vast, unseen forces that govern daily life. A farmer might wear an amulet bearing the design not to honor a god, but to magically protect his field from blight. A mother might whisper a prayer over the symbol to break a fever in her child. This pragmatic, hands-on interpretation reveals a third distinct path for our traveling motif. It was no longer a distant object of worship or a somber guide for the departed. It was a lever pulled in the hopes of changing one's immediate fate, demonstrating the symbol's profound utility in the most intimate struggles of human existence. This very practicality would soon lead it to its most grounded role yet, shaping the physical world in the most fundamental ways. Our symbol's journey through the tangible world of tools and talismans was only a prelude to its most abstract transformation. It entered the smoky laboratories and candlelit scriptoria of the alchemists, a realm where the quest was not for material wealth alone, but for the ultimate prize, the purification of the soul itself. In this environment, our motif shed its external roles. It was no longer a map for the dead or a lever for magic. It became a blueprint for an internal migration, a guided path for the transformation of the human spirit. The alchemists spoke in a secret language of elements and processes, using terms like the negrido, the blackening, or the rubido, the reddening. Our symbol, with its geometric clarity, was perfectly suited to illustrate these stages. Perhaps its simple circle and dot were reimagined as the prima materia, the formless base substance of the self, or maybe its lines multiplied into a complex series of interlocking shapes, a square inside a triangle inside a circle, each representing a different stage of spiritual refinement. This was not a literal recipe for turning lead into gold. It was a coded map for turning the lead of a base, chaotic human nature into the gold of an enlightened, perfected being, what they called the Philosopher's Stone. The laboratory equipment, the bubbling flasks and burning furnaces, were merely the external theater. The real work happened within the alchemist's own mind and soul as they meditated upon these symbols. The circle and dot was no longer an object to be looked at, but a gateway to be passed through. An initiate would focus on its form, tracing its paths in their imagination, using it as a key to unlock deeper states of consciousness and self-awareness. Every curve represented a challenge overcome, every intersection a lesson integrated. This was the symbol's fourth ending, a profound pivot from the outer world to the vast inner landscape of the human psyche. It demonstrates the motif's breathtaking versatility, proving it could serve not just kings and priests, but anyone on a solitary quest for meaning, providing a silent, geometric companion for the most personal of journeys. But the human journey is not only one of spirit, it is also one of society. While the alchemist sought to perfect the soul in solitude, a new power was rising, one that sought to forge millions of souls into a single, unified will. This brings us to the fifth and final ending for our traveling motif, a transformation so complete it redefined the symbol's very purpose. It was stripped of its mystical aura and its personal magic, polished clean, and repurposed for a secular, political goal, the unification of a people. Picture a vast, rising empire, its borders freshly drawn, encompassing dozens of different cultures, languages, and old loyalties. The new rulers face a monumental task: how to make all these diverse groups see themselves as one nation. They need a symbol, one that feels ancient, timeless, and familiar, but also one they can control. Our circle and dot, with its deep roots across the continent, is the perfect candidate. Its very antiquity is its power. It is not a new invention of the state, but something that feels like it has always been there, giving the new regime a borrowed sense of legitimacy, a timeless and natural right to rule. So the symbol is cast onto the coins that fill every merchant's purse. It is stitched onto the flags that lead armies into battle. It is carved into the great seals that authenticate every law and treaty. Its meaning is no longer open to personal interpretation. It is now dictated from the capital. A farmer who once saw the symbol as a charm for his crops now sees it on his tax collector's uniform. A weaver who recognized it from an old family story now weaves it into banners for a king she has never met. The symbol rallies armies to defend borders that did not exist a generation ago. It inspires a new kind of patriotism, a love for the abstract idea of the nation itself. This is the ultimate repurposing of our primal seed. Its journey, which began as a personal tool for survival magic and wandered through the realms of creator gods, soul guides, and alchemical maps, ends here as an instrument of mass political identity. It no longer speaks to the individual soul seeking meaning, but to the collective citizen pledging allegiance. And this final, powerful ending forces a profound question upon us. What does it truly mean when a symbol of such personal, spiritual heritage is co-opted by the power of the state? This transformation of a sacred symbol into a political weapon is not a rare story. Perhaps the most devastatingly clear example of this process is the journey of the swastika. For thousands of years, this simple hooked cross was a traveler of immense goodwill. It appeared in the ancient Indus Valley, a sacred mark representing the sun's eternal cycle. It was carved into Native American petroglyphs as a symbol of the four winds and the movement of life. You could find it etched on Greek pottery, woven into Celtic knots, and painted on the walls of Buddhist temples, where it stood for the Buddha's own footsteps and the wheel of Dharma. Its meaning was almost universally positive, a visual shorthand for fortune, auspiciousness, and the cosmic power of the sun. Its migration across continents, carried along trade routes from India to Scandinavia and across the Bering Land Bridge into the Americas, is a perfect illustration of our theme. It was adaptable, fitting seamlessly into dozens of spiritual systems, always retaining its core connotation of blessing. This was its long, peaceful journey. But a symbol's path is not predetermined. Its story can be violently rewritten. In the early 20th century, a fledgling political movement in Germany was searching for a powerful emblem. They needed something that felt ancient, primal, and uniquely Aryan. They seized upon the swastika, divorcing it completely from its global history of peace. They tilted it, framed it in white and red, and imbued it with a new, terrifying meaning: racial purity and militant nationalism. This was not an evolution. It was an act of cultural theft, a brutal appropriation that weaponized an ancient sign of life. In a single generation, a symbol that had meant well-being for millennia was corrupted into an icon of hatred, genocide, and world war. This dark turn forces a difficult question upon our entire exploration. The migration of symbols is not always a beautiful story of shared human imagination. Sometimes it is a cautionary tale. It reminds us that these powerful shapes carry no inherent morality, only the meanings we assign to them, and that those meanings can be tragically, irrevocably stolen. The story of the swastika reveals a dark potential in every symbol that travels, but another ancient design offers a more hopeful vision of the same journey. A serpent forms a perfect circle by swallowing its own tail. This is the Ouroboros, and its path across cultures is a profound mystery. We find it coiled in the papyri of ancient Egypt, wrapped around the world of Norse myth, and illustrated in the cryptic manuscripts of Greek alchemists. Its widespread presence poses a fascinating question. Did this single, potent idea migrate along forgotten trade routes from one civilization to the next? Or was it born separately in the minds of people who simply looked at the world in the same fundamental way? The answer might be both. The Ouroboros feels almost inevitable. It is a shape that speaks directly to the most basic rhythms of human life, the rising and setting of the sun, the endless turn of the seasons, the very cycle of birth and death that defines our existence. Its migration could have been physical, carried on a clay tablet from a Nile merchant to a Phoenician sailor. But it could also have been a psychic migration, an idea whose time had come in dozens of different places at once, simply because it answers a question every culture must eventually ask. What is the nature of time itself? In ancient Egypt, the Ouroboros was deeply tied to this question. It represented the cyclical flow of time, not as a straight line progressing forward, but as an eternal loop, a cosmic repetition of patterns. The serpent devouring itself was a perfect image of the Nile's annual flood, which would recede and return with absolute regularity, bringing life and death in a never-ending dance. This was time as a familiar, repeating story. Yet when this same symbol reached the philosophers and mystics of the Hellenistic world, its meaning shifted. For the Gnostics and the early alchemists, the Ouroboros was not just about time. It became a symbol of ultimate unity. The serpent, by consuming itself, embodied the idea that all things are one, that creation and destruction are two sides of the same process. In their laboratories, it illustrated the concept that the end of a process is also its beginning, that the philosopher's stone could only be created by breaking down the self and rebuilding it. The circle was a map of the soul's journey, a promise that all opposites could be reconciled into a single, perfect whole. Then, far to the north, the symbol took on a truly cosmic scale. In Norse mythology, the world serpent Jörmungandr grew so large that it encircled the entire realm of Midgard, grasping its own tail in its mouth. Here, the Ouroboros was no longer a philosophical concept. It was a physical boundary, a literal force of nature that contained the known world and separated it from the chaos beyond. Its body was the horizon, and its eventual release during Ragnarok would mean the end of that world. One symbol, three distinct endings, a representation of time's cycle, a diagram of spiritual unity, and a literal map of the cosmos. The Ouroboros demonstrates that some motifs are so deeply embedded in the architecture of human thought that they feel less like inventions and more like discoveries. They are latent in our shared psyche, waiting for cultures to stumble upon them, each giving the eternal serpent a different name and a different, yet eerily similar, purpose. So the question becomes, how do we know if a symbol traveled or if it simply appeared? This introduces a critical idea from biology, convergent evolution. In the natural world, sharks and dolphins look remarkably similar. Both have sleek, streamlined bodies, powerful tails, and dorsal fins. Yet one is a fish and the other is a mammal. They developed these nearly identical forms not because they shared a common ancestor with those traits, but because that specific shape is the perfect solution to a shared problem, moving efficiently through water. The same principle applies to human symbols. Two cultures, completely isolated by oceans or mountains, can and do arrive at the exact same symbolic design because they are trying to solve the same fundamental human problem. How do you visually represent the sun? A circle with radiating lines is an almost inevitable answer. How do you depict the concept of a sacred center, a point from which everything emanates? A circle with a dot at its heart is a logical, almost instinctual solution. These are not necessarily copied ideas. They are parallel inventions born from confronting the same universal realities. A spiral can emerge independently in a dozen cultures as a representation of growth, of whirlpools, of celestial galaxies, or the labyrinth of life itself. Distinguishing between a migrant and a native invention is one of the great detective stories in archaeology and mythology. The clues lie in the details. One of the first things scholars look for is the complexity of the design. A simple circle is highly likely to be a case of convergent evolution. It is a basic geometric form. But if you find a highly specific, intricate symbol, like a multi-layered labyrinth with a unique sequence of turns, appearing in both the Mediterranean and Mesoamerica, the odds of that being an independent invention plummet. Such a specific, complex design is a stronger candidate for migration. The next clue is the existence of a contact route. Is there any evidence, however faint, of trade, migration, or communication between the two cultures? Did they share a common border? Were there known sea routes or land paths that could have facilitated the exchange of goods and, with them, ideas? Finding a shared symbol on two sides of an impassable mountain range with no known trails is very different from finding it in two port cities that traded actively. Finally, and perhaps most tellingly, are the stories attached to the symbol. If two cultures share not only the visual motif but also a strikingly similar myth about its meaning, the case for migration becomes powerful. Imagine one culture has a story about a cosmic egg that hatched the universe, represented by a circle with a dot. If another culture, thousands of miles away, has the same symbol and tells a nearly identical story of a world egg, it is difficult to argue that this is mere coincidence. The symbol and its narrative have traveled as a complete package. This methodological toolkit adds a layer of scientific rigor to our mythological journey, transforming it from mere speculation into a disciplined investigation of the human imagination. It reminds us that while our minds may wander similar paths, the footprints we leave behind can tell us whether we walked together or simply arrived at the same destination alone. Our traveling motif has now entered its most accelerated phase, the digital frontier. Here, symbols do not drift on slow currents of trade or migration. They ricochet across the globe at the speed of light, carried on the invisible highways of the internet. A corporate logo, a character from a video game, or a simple hand gesture can be captured, replicated, and remixed by millions of users in a matter of hours. This is the era of the mimetic symbol, and the ancient process of migration and reinterpretation is happening faster than ever before. Think of a popular app icon, a simple, stylized shape. In its original context, it is a tool for communication, but an online subculture might seize upon it, isolating it from its corporate origins. They might turn it into a symbol of rebellion, an inside joke, or a marker of shared identity. The core design remains, but its meaning is completely inverted, given a new ending by its digital adopters. Or consider a political emblem. In one country, it represents national pride. But when that same symbol is uploaded to a global platform, it can be adopted by groups on the other side of the world who have no connection to its original meaning. They might use it ironically, or they might layer it with their own local political struggles, creating a hybrid meaning the original creators never intended. The digital landscape is the new continent, a vast and unmapped territory of shifting communities. Each subculture, from gaming forums to social media activist groups, acts like a new civilization, applying its own unique cultural lens to the symbols that flood its feeds. They are the modern equivalents of the ancient priests and traders, taking a raw visual form and pouring their own beliefs, humor, and anxieties into it. This rapid-fire evolution shows that the human drive to repurpose symbols is not a relic of the past. It is a fundamental, living force. Understanding how a meme is born, how it mutates, and how it gains power is not just about tracking internet trends. It is about watching the age-old dance of human culture unfold in real time, proving that the journey of a single motif is a story with no end. So how do we move from these grand theories of migration to solid, physical proof? The evidence is not written in any ancient language. It is etched into the clay of a broken pot, stamped onto a corroded coin, and woven into the faded pattern of a textile fragment. This is the domain of the archaeologist, the detective who pieces together the symbol's journey from the silent artifacts it left behind. Their work begins with a single, seemingly insignificant object. Imagine a small carnelian bead, excavated from a Mesopotamian city layer dated to 2300 B.C. It is etched with a precise circle and dot. Now picture an almost identical bead found in the ruins of a major Indus Valley city, hundreds of miles to the east from a stratum dated 200 years later. The similarity is too exact to be a coincidence. This is the first clue. The archaeologist then asks a crucial question. Is there a known path connecting these 2 points? The answer lies in the other objects found alongside these beads. In Mesopotamia, they find Indus Valley seals. In the Indus Valley, they uncover Mesopotamian pottery. A trade route is confirmed. The symbol did not fly, it walked, carried in a merchant's pouch along established roads and sea lanes. The timeline sealed by carbon dating on organic materials found in the same layer tells the story of its movement. It appears first in one region, then, predictably, shows up in the next like a footprint left along a well-trodden path. Another powerful example comes from the Mediterranean. A specific spiral motif, one that looks like a series of interconnected whirlpools, appears on palace frescoes in Minoan, Crete. The same intricate pattern, with the exact same number of turns and the same stylistic flair, is later discovered painted on pottery in the tombs of Egyptian nobles. The archaeological record shows active trade between these civilizations, with Minoan pottery being a prized import in Egypt. The symbol's path is clear, traveling on the hulls of ships laden with olive oil and precious metals. This is not a story of psychic connection or convergent evolution. This is a story of contact, of cultural exchange made visible through the durable remnants of everyday life. Stratigraphy, the study of soil layers, provides the chronological backbone. By carefully noting that the symbol appears in a deeper, older layer in Crete and a shallower, younger layer in Egypt, the archaeologists can literally map its progress through time. This tangible evidence, this trail of physical breadcrumbs, is what transforms our speculative saga into a documented historical process. It grounds the journey of a single motif not in the realm of myth, but in the dirt and stone of the material world, proving that ideas have always been among our most enduring exports. A symbol often carries its name like a secret passport. Linguistic analysis deciphers these ancient connections, adding a voice to the silent artifacts we unearth. When the same word for a sacred object echoes across different languages, it creates a powerful parallel path of evidence. The journey of an idea is rarely just a visual migration. It is also a story told, a name whispered from one culture to the next. Take the mighty trident, a symbol of sea gods and cosmic power. The Greek word for this three-pronged spear is triana. Far to the east, in the sacred texts of ancient India, we find the Sanskrit trid, a letter 1, e4, 7 letter 1, a0, d. The phonetic resemblance is striking, but the connection deepens with meaning. Both words describe a staff or a weapon with three distinct parts. This is not a coincidence. It suggests that the concept of the trident as a divine emblem did not just appear independently in Greece and India. Instead, the symbol and its name likely traveled together along the trade routes that connected these worlds, carried by merchants and myth-makers who shared stories of gods wielding three-pointed power. The word itself becomes a fossil, preserving the sound of an ancient exchange. Another profound example lies in the symbol of the thunderbolt, a weapon of the supreme sky god. The Greek koronos for thunderbolt finds a startling cousin in the Sanskrit execute a letter 1, e4, 7y, a word for a divine weapon or a spear. Linguists trace these terms back to a hypothetical root in the Proto-Indo-European language, the ancient mother tongue of many languages from Europe to India. This shared linguistic heritage implies that the people who spoke these languages also carried with them a shared mythology, a concept of a celestial father god who wielded a weapon of lightning. The symbol carved onto a temple frieze in Greece and the one described in a Vedic hymn in India are not just visually similar ideas, they are linguistic siblings, their names diverging from a single, common source. This detective work goes beyond simple word matching. It tracks how a word's meaning, its semantics, can shift during its journey, reflecting how a symbol was reinterpreted. A term that once meant a literal weapon might evolve in a new land to represent abstract divine authority or spiritual illumination. By following these phonetic and semantic trails, we are not just tracing the migration of a design, we are listening to the conversation of the ancient world, a conversation where words and images traveled in tandem, binding continents together with stories long before the first map was ever drawn. Yet for every symbol that found a new home, another was turned away at the border. The migration of a motif was never guaranteed. It was a negotiation, and sometimes the local cultural identity slammed the door shut. A powerful example of this rejection unfolded when a civilization with a single, all-powerful god encountered the vibrant, complex pantheon of its neighbors. The symbols of those foreign deities, no matter how beautiful or ancient, were not simply ignored. They were seen as dangerous lies, idols representing false powers that could lead the people astray. A statue of a many-armed goddess or a carved emblem of a bull-headed god would not be reinterpreted or absorbed. It would be actively destroyed, smashed to pieces to purge the land of its influence. This was not a failure of the symbol to communicate, but a violent refusal to listen to its message. The local belief system acted as an impermeable filter, rejecting anything that threatened its core theological truth. Similarly, the fate of a symbol could be sealed by raw political power. When an empire conquered a people, it often engaged in a campaign of symbolic erasure. The victors understood that to truly dominate, they had to break the spirit of the conquered, and that meant destroying the visual anchors of their identity. The sacred emblem of a defeated kingdom would be systematically chiseled off temple walls. Coins bearing the old ruler's portrait would be melted down and recast with the face of the new emperor. This was more than just replacing one image with another. It was an attempt to murder memory itself, to sever a people from their history and their gods, forcing them to accept the symbols of their subjugation. These cases of resistance and rejection reveal the hard boundaries of the ancient world. They show us that cultural exchange had its limits, defined by deep-seated taboos and the brutal realities of power. A symbol's journey was not a peaceful, inevitable drift. It was a perilous voyage that could end not in a new beginning, but in a silent, purposeful end. The hands that shaped the world's great symbols rarely belonged to kings or high priests. They were the calloused hands of the potter spinning clay at a wheel, the weaver threading his loom, and the blacksmith hammering hot metal. These artisans were the unsung engines of our symbol's long migration. A weaver in one town might meticulously reproduce a complex border pattern for a ceremonial textile. He did not need to know it represented the walls of the cosmic egg in a distant temple's doctrine. His concern was the commission, the rhythm of the repeating motif, and the beauty of the final piece. He was simply following a pattern, a design passed down from a master or requested by a wealthy patron. In that simple act of skilled repetition, he became an unwitting courier. He was not consciously spreading a grand theological idea. He was just doing his job, yet his craft ensured the symbol's physical survival and its journey to the next village, the next market, the next generation. This is how profound ideas often travel, not on the wings of philosophical debate, but in the practical, tangible goods of everyday life and trade. A beautifully painted pot carrying our circle and dot motif was valued for its craftsmanship and its pleasing form. Its aesthetic appeal, the perfect balance of the circle, the satisfying centrality of the dot, gave it a life beyond its original meaning. Long after the people in a region forgot that the symbol once honored a creator god, they still found it beautiful. They continued to carve it, weave it, and stamp it onto their belongings simply because it was a good design, a familiar and comforting pattern. This visual appeal became a kind of life raft for the symbol. It allowed the form to persist through centuries, even as its soul, its original meaning, faded from memory. And that was the crucial preparation for its next great leap. A symbol whose meaning has been emptied is not a dead symbol. It is a vessel waiting to be filled. It arrives in a new culture as a blank slate with a beautiful, time-worn patina, perfectly poised to absorb an entirely new story, a new god, a new purpose, all because an artisan, simply doing their job, kept its form alive. The arrival of European colonial powers did not just redraw the map of the world, it violently rewrote the symbolic landscape. This was not the slow, organic drift of trade or the shared discovery of a universal pattern. This was a forced migration, an ideological imposition backed by the sword and the cross. Colonizers systematically targeted the sacred symbols of indigenous peoples, branding them as pagan idols or savage markings that had to be erased to save souls and cement control. A carved totem pole representing a lineage of ancestral spirits was seen not as a complex cultural text, but as an object of devil worship to be burned. A woven textile imbued with protective geometric patterns was dismissed as primitive craft, its deeper meanings ignored and suppressed. In their place, the colonizers erected their own iconography. The cross was planted on sacred ground, the image of a distant monarch was stamped onto new currency, and the architecture of churches replaced that of local temples. This was a conscious campaign to sever people from their visual language, to disconnect them from the stories that gave their world meaning and their community cohesion. The goal was a spiritual and cultural conquest as total as the military one. Yet, the human spirit is remarkably resilient, and symbols proved to be powerful tools of quiet rebellion. In a profound act of cultural resistance, colonized peoples began to perform a delicate and dangerous alchemy. They took the very symbols of their oppressors and secretly hollowed them out, filling them with their own hidden meanings. A Catholic saint in a church mural might be painted with the subtle features of a banned indigenous deity. The cross itself might be woven into a textile pattern alongside older, pre-colonial motifs, creating a syncretic fusion that appeared compliant to the missionary's eye, but whispered a different truth to the initiated. These hybrid forms were not a sign of surrender. They were a coded language of survival, a way to preserve a forbidden identity right under the nose of power. A symbol of subjugation was subtly transformed into a badge of secret solidarity. This period forces us to acknowledge that the journey of a motif is never a purely aesthetic or spiritual affair. It is deeply entangled with raw power, with who has the authority to dictate what an image means. The colonial era adds a stark socio-political dimension to our story, reminding us that a symbol's migration can be a record of conquest, but also a testament to the unyielding human will to find a way to speak, even in silence. These bustling hubs of the ancient world were far more than just trade depots. They were living laboratories for the human imagination, where our migrating symbol faced its most creative transformation yet. In cities like Alexandria, where Greek philosophers debated in the shadow of Egyptian temples, or Palmyra, a caravan oasis where Roman legions mingled with Parthian merchants, a profound process called syncretism took hold. This was not a simple case of one meaning replacing another. It was a true fusion, a marriage of ideas where the original significance of the symbol blended seamlessly with a powerful local concept to birth something entirely new and unexpected. The result was a hybrid deity, a figure that felt familiar to people from multiple cultures precisely because it contained echoes of their own gods. Consider the creation of Serapis in Ptolemaic Egypt. The Greek ruling class needed a state god that both they and their Egyptian subjects could worship, so they took the Egyptian god Osiris Apis, a chthonic deity of the underworld, and fused him with aspects of the Greek gods Zeus, the king of the gods, Asclepius, the god of healing, and Dionysus, the god of fertility and ecstasy. The resulting figure, Serapis, was a composite of immense power. He was a god of the afterlife, of healing, of abundance, and of supreme cosmic authority, all rolled into one. A Greek colonist could look at a statue of Serapis and see the bearded, paternal majesty of Zeus. An Egyptian farmer could gaze upon the same statue and recognize the serene power of Osiris. Our traveling symbol, perhaps a scepter or a specific crown, would be part of this visual package. Its meaning was no longer purely Greek or purely Egyptian. It now represented the shared, synthesized power of this new, deliberately created divinity. This process reveals that cultural exchange at its deepest level is not about conquest or erasure. It is a collaborative, two-way street. The local tradition is not simply overwritten by the foreign one. Instead, they engage in a dialogue, negotiating a shared symbolic language that can speak to a diverse population. This creative synthesis demonstrates a remarkable human capacity to find common ground, to see one's own truth reflected in the sacred stories of a stranger, and from that meeting, to generate a rich, complex tradition that belongs to everyone and no one at the same time. This resonance with a pre-existing blueprint is the very heart of the symbol's psychological power. Why does a simple circle feel so complete, or a spiral seem to pull at something deep within us? The psychologist Carl Jung offered a compelling answer with his theory of archetypes. He suggested that beneath our personal minds lies a vast, shared reservoir of human experience, a collective unconscious. Within this deep well, certain fundamental symbols and story patterns are already imprinted, hardwired into our species. Think of archetypes as the psychic equivalent of our physical instincts. We are not taught to fear the dark, we just do. In the same way, Jung argued, we are not taught the profound meaning of the spiral or the mandala. We are born with a latent understanding of them. These forms are innate psychic structures, waiting to be activated by the world around us. This theory elegantly bridges the two great forces we have been exploring, migration and convergent evolution. A symbol migrates successfully not just because it is beautiful or useful, but because it clicks perfectly into a psychic slot that already exists in every person who sees it. When a merchant from Mesopotamia showed a circle and dot amulet to a chieftain in Central Asia, the chieftain did not see a foreign, confusing mark. He felt a subconscious pull, a deep-seated recognition. The symbol resonated with his own internal archetype of the center, the self, or the sun, making its adoption feel natural and deeply meaningful. Conversely, convergent evolution is also explained. Two cultures on opposite sides of the planet can invent the spiral independently because the spiral is not just an idea they are inventing, it is a structure they are discovering within themselves. It is the shape of a fern unfurling, the path of a circling hawk, the whirl of water down a drain, all filtered through the universal human mind and emerging in art and myth as a shared discovery of a shared inner truth. The Great Mother, the Wise Old Man, the hero's journey, these are not just stories we tell. They are the fundamental software of the human psyche, and our traveling symbols are their most enduring and powerful icons. A myth was more than a simple story. It was a living, breathing delivery system for the culture's most vital information. Wandering bards and oral historians acted as the ancient world's broadband, carrying entire cosmologies in their memories. They did not simply tell a tale, they performed it with a tangible, theatrical power. A storyteller might plant his staff, carved with a spiral or a circle and dot, firmly into the earth, making that symbol the visual anchor for his epic. As he spoke of a great flood or a hero's descent into the underworld, his hands might trace the same patterns in the dirt, etching the symbol directly into the imagination of his audience. The narrative was the perfect packaging. A complex philosophical concept about the nature of time was difficult to explain in the abstract, but when woven into the thrilling saga of a serpent that swallows its own tail, the idea became unforgettable. The symbol and the story were a single, inseparable unit. The emotional resonance of the hero's journey, the terror of the deluge, the wonder of creation, all that feeling became permanently glued to the visual motif. This is how a symbol gained its emotional weight and its incredible staying power. It was not an isolated image to be memorized. It was the emblem on the hero's shield, the shape of the magical portal, the mark left by the gods. When that myth traveled, carried by a trader who heard it in a foreign port or a migrant who carried it as a piece of home, the symbol hitched a ride inside a protective shell of narrative. The story provided the context that made the symbol meaningful, giving it a reason to be adopted, remembered, and passed on again. This symbiotic relationship between story and symbol ensured that our migrating motif was never just an empty shape. It was always a key that unlocked a world. We now have all the pieces to reconstruct a final, hypothetical journey for our symbol. Let us trace the path of its 26th migration, beginning in the bustling cities of the ancient Indus Valley. Here, the circle and dot was not a grand spiritual emblem. It was a tool of commerce, meticulously carved into soapstone seals used by merchants to stamp bales of cotton and bundles of timber. This was its identity, a mark of authenticity and ownership in one of the world's first great trading civilizations. Carried northwest along established routes, this merchant seal arrived in the heart of the sprawling Persian Empire. The Achaemenid kings, masters of administration and iconography, saw immense value in this foreign design. They absorbed it, but they also transformed it. The simple circle and dot was enlarged, framed with wings and regal beasts, and repurposed as a royal insignia. It was stamped onto the clay tablets of imperial decrees and etched into the foundation stones of palaces. Its meaning had completely shifted from a guarantee of a merchant's word to a symbol of the king's absolute, God-given power. From the Persian court, the symbol was carried further north and west by trade and tribute into the vast, open steppes of Scythia. For these nomadic warriors, the Persian emblem of a distant king's authority was useless, but its power was not. They looked at the same design and saw something else entirely, a portable source of magic for a life spent on horseback. The symbol was reforged in gold, becoming an ornate plaque to be sewn onto a chieftain's garment or hung from a horse's bridle. Its meaning shifted once more from imperial insignia to a protective talisman for the hunter and the warrior, a charm to ensure success in the hunt and safety in battle. This talisman, traded for furs and amber, eventually traveled the final leg of its long journey, reaching the hill forts and sacred groves of the Celtic tribes in Western Europe. The Celts possessed a world-view centered on the interconnectedness of all life, of the physical and spiritual worlds. In their hands, the symbol underwent its most beautiful transformation. The gold plaque was melted down and its essential form was deconstructed and rewoven. The circle and dot unraveled, its lines stretching, curling, and looping back on themselves. It became the core of an intricate knotwork design, a pattern with no beginning and no end. The dot, the once spark of consciousness, was now the empty space where all the lines met and parted, symbolizing the sacred center from which all life flows and to which it all returns. Its journey was complete. A merchant's seal became a king's emblem, then a warrior's charm, and finally, a philosopher's vision of the universe, proving that a single motif can carry an entire world of changing meaning within its simple, enduring shape. These 5 endings are not just random destinations. They form a complete psychological map of our shared humanity. Each one answers a different fundamental question that every culture, in its own way, must eventually ask. The creator deity speaks to our profound need for an origin story. Where did we come from? Why is there something instead of nothing? This first ending transforms the symbol into a cosmic parent, a source of all existence that gives our lives a sense of purpose and place within a grand, ordered universe. The Guide for the Dead addresses our most primal fear, the great unknown that awaits us all. What happens when we die? This version of the symbol offers comfort and a path, a way to navigate the terrifying journey into darkness with the hope of a safe arrival. It is a visual promise that we are not simply extinguished. Then, the tool for magic reveals our deep-seated desire to exert control over a chaotic and unpredictable world. When the rains do not come, when illness strikes, when the hunt fails, we reach for any lever that might change our fate. This symbol became that lever, a practical instrument to influence the forces that govern our daily survival. The alchemical diagram marks a profound inward turn. It answers the question, how can I become better? How can I refine my own soul? This is not about controlling the external world, but about mastering the internal one, transforming the base lead of our flaws into the golden wisdom of enlightenment. And finally, the political emblem confronts the challenge of living together. How do we create order from the chaos of millions of individuals? This ending uses the symbol to forge a collective identity, to build walls of belonging and rally people around a common banner, sacrificing personal interpretation for social cohesion. So this single, migrating motif is far more than a shared design. It is a mirror. It proves that while our cultures built different temples and told different stories, the foundational anxieties and aspirations that built them are universal. Our solutions are wonderfully diverse, but the questions we ask are the same. That recycling symbol on your water bottle, 3 arrows chasing each other in an endless loop, is a direct descendant of the Ouroboros, the serpent eating its own tail. It is a modern mantra for sustainability, yet its underlying message about cycles and renewal is ancient beyond memory. look at the logo of a major tech company or a financial institution. So many are built around a central point with elements radiating outward or arranged in a balanced circular pattern. These corporate mandalas are not accidental. Designers use these shapes because they subconsciously communicate unity, stability, and trust, tapping into the same archetypal pull that made the circle and dot a symbol for a creator god. The Tree of Life, a motif that appears in everything from sacred texts to a tattoo on someone's arm, has roots that stretch back to the very first urban centers. It connected the underworld, the earthly realm, and the heavens then, and it still represents connection, growth, and personal lineage today. We are constantly surrounded by these travelers. Their original sacred power may have faded into aesthetic appeal or commercial function, but their DNA remains. Every time you see a spiral on a public monument, a labyrinth pattern on a hospital floor meant to inspire calm, or even the concentric circles of a Wi-Fi symbol suggesting invisible connection, you are witnessing the latest chapter in a migration that began thousands of years ago. Our modern world is a living archive, a visual palimpsest where the old writings of human meaning are still faintly visible beneath the glossy new text. To recognize this is to gain a new kind of literacy. It allows us to see the deep history embedded in the most mundane objects and to feel the hum of that long, intertwined human story all around us, a story we are still writing with every symbol we create and carry forward. We began with a single symbol carved in stone, and we end with a map of the human mind itself. This journey across 26 migrations is far more than a history of art. It is a powerful testament to our shared creativity, our boundless adaptability, and the deep, invisible threads that have always connected us. Ideas are the most durable travelers we have ever produced. They require no passport, they defy every border, and they possess a miraculous ability to transform themselves, to learn new languages of meaning with every culture they greet. This is the legacy of our circle and dot, a shape that became a god, a soul guide, a magical lever, a map for inner transformation, and a banner for empires. It proves that while we have built our civilizations in isolation, the foundational questions we ask are universal. Our answers are wonderfully diverse, but the longing for origin, for safety in death, for control, for enlightenment, and for belonging, these are the common roots from which all our stories grow. So the next time your eye catches a recurring pattern in a woven blanket, the facade of an old building, or the sleek logo of a global brand, pause for a moment. Look closer. You are not just seeing a design, you are potentially glimpsing a world traveler, a veteran of ancient trade routes and forgotten empires, carrying a story thousands of years in the making. What symbols whisper to you from the architecture of your city, the patterns on your grandmother's china, or the jewelry you wear every day? We would love to hear what you discover. Share the world travelers you find in your own life in the comments below. And if this journey through the deep time of human imagination resonated with you, subscribe for more explorations into the hidden myths that shape our world.